Was trading for Eugenio Suarez the right move by the D-backs, or should they have gone after one of the free agent third baseman? Discussing that on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast.
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I'm your host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. Been hosting this pod since 2020. Now the D-backs are on the precipice of one of the biggest off seasons in franchise history after coming off a World Series appearance. And they just made a big move by trading for Eugenio Suarez, which we're going to be talking about on today's podcast. But before we get there, just want to say thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free and available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends, and please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. But now let's get into the podcast. Let's talk about the Suarez trade. Hopefully everyone had a good Thanksgiving. This trade happened right before the holidays, and I'm super grateful for Mike Hazen for pulling off a deal like this, because even though Eugenio Suarez is a flawed player, he's still an upgrade over the D-backs' current situation. And I kind of just want to go through the pros and cons of Suarez, the flaws in his game, because like I said, he's not a perfect player. He is a flawed player. So we'll start with those cons, talk about the weaknesses in his game, the vulnerabilities in his game. Then we'll talk about how he is an upgrade over the D-backs' current third base situation and how this is a win for the organization. So let's first start with the Suarez cons, because the first thing you notice when you look at that baseball reference for Suarez, there's a lot of bold, and all the bold is in one column under his baseball reference under the strikeouts, because 3 of the last 5 years in the American League, or not in the American League, just in baseball, because he was traded from the Cincinnati Reds to the Seattle Mariners. So in 2019, he played for the Reds, led the National League in strikeouts. Then the last 2 years, 2022 and 2023, has led the American League in strikeouts. 3 of the last 5 years, Suarez has led his league in the strikeouts. He is a strikeout machine, which is probably the biggest weakness when looking at his game. The dude strikes out a ton. For his career, 27% K rate. And over the last 2 years, his strikeout percentage has been above 30%. So when you're watching a Suarez, he's a little bit of a feast or famine player. He's a little bit of one of those home run or strikeout type of dudes, which is, I think, okay for what the D-backs' current third base situation is. And Suarez is someone that definitely strikes out a ton. He's also someone that is brought in for his power profile, but he is coming off a down power season. If you take out the 2020 COVID-shortened season, this was Suarez's lowest power output since 2016, when he hit 21 home runs for the Cincinnati Reds. He had 22 home runs this past season, which is still a pretty good mark considering the D-backs' third baseman power situation this past year. But 22 home runs in 162 games, just didn't see the power that we normally see from Suarez. He had 31 home runs in 2022, 31 home runs in 2021. We'll look past 2020, but you look at 2019, 49 home runs. Despite coming off the down power season, you still feel pretty good that there's potential for bounce back with Suarez. You still feel like, yeah, there's still that 30 to 40 home run potential with him. Maybe he's coming off a down season. Maybe it was a weird year in Seattle. Like, there's a lot of just offensive players. You look at that lineup for Seattle this past season that just had weird years. The Julio Rodriguez's, like, he ended up finishing really well, but those first 3 months of the season, 4 months of the season for Julio, not very good, right? the Teoscar Hernandez of the world had a pretty weird season in Seattle too. Like I think a lot of their offense players just really didn't have a good season. And maybe there was something with the coaching staff, their philosophy to their approaches at the plate. I don't know what it was, but I think it was just a weird season offensively for a lot of those Seattle players. And maybe Suarez is a casualty of what was going on in that environment. So I would like to think Suarez, the 22 home runs, I would like to think that's not the number we're going to see going forward. I would like to believe he still has that over 30 home run potential still in there. Um, he's not great with runners in scoring position, men on the bases, or high leverage moments. So that is going to be an issue. Suarez is not a super clutch player, so he might be giving you a little Christian Walker vibes, where it's a lot of solo home runs, a lot of home run. Maybe when there's a guy on first base, maybe he strikes out a ton of runners in scoring position. Like we might be getting another Christian Walker esque player in a Suarez, but even if that's so, we still thought Christian Walker was arguably the MVP of the D-backs this past season if there wasn't a Corbin Carroll. We still all think Christian Walker is an all-star level player despite not making an all-star team. We think he's still an all-star level player. We still think Christian Walker is a rock star. So even Suarez is a guy that's hitting a lot of solo home runs and not coming through as much as you would like in the middle of the order or with runners in scoring position. Suarez is still someone that put up 96 RBIs last year, and that's with struggling in those clutch situations. So imagine if he gets a little bit better in those clutch situations with his already 96 RBIs that he just had. There's potential for Suarez to have a monster run producing season next year for the Arizona Diamondbacks. And then my last struggle, I'm sorry, I had like a little hair going in my mouth. Apologize to the YouTube audience if you saw that. And just a quick reminder, a quick note, not a reminder. The YouTube audience, you will just see me talking about the Suarez trade. The audio audience, we have part two with Javier Reyes talking about superlatives and handing out some MLB awards. So I know that's in the middle of the segment. I forgot to give that note at the top of my podcast. So sorry, YouTube audience, this is the only video you will see. Go to the YouTube channel to see the superlatives me and Javi hand out. But the audio listeners, you don't have to do anything. You will get part two right here on this podcast. But let's get back into the podcast and talk about why Suarez is a clear upgrade over the situation. Oh, there was one more con that I didn't talk about. With Suarez that I almost forgot about. He struggles against breaking and off-speed pitches. When you look at his numbers in his career against those kind of pitches, specifically even last year in 2023, he batted below 200 against both breaking balls and off-speed pitches. Just not good enough. And that's been the case throughout most of his career. You look at 2021, below 200 average against both breaking balls and off-speed pitches. That just never been an area where he's really thrived, and that's why his strikeout numbers are so high. His whiff percentage in 2023 on breaking balls, 38.6%. On off-speed pitches, 37%. So this is a guy that swings through a lot of those types of pitches, and that's an area that he has to improve in, but he's still someone, because now we're going to talk about the pros. He's still someone, even with those flaws, still an upgrade over the D-backs current situation. Because let's talk about the pros of Suarez. Because if you just want to look at the D-backs situation last year, D-backs third baseman 2023, 234 average, 303 OBP, 340 slugging, 75 WRC plus, 10 home runs, 64 ribbies, and a .5 F4. Just pedestrian numbers at best. Third base was a black hole for the D-backs in 2023. Evan Longoria was projected to come in, be that veteran, be that power platoon bat. He did provide some pop early in the season. Bat fell off big time as the season went along. Ice cold in the postseason. Perdomo played mostly shortstop this past year, so he didn't affect third base too much as opposed to what he did in 2022. Manny Rivera, hot start to the season. He cooled off considerably. And then it's like after that, who else did the D-backs really have at third base? Jace Peterson. Buddy Kennedy probably got a little run at third base last year. Like D-backs third base was awful. It was basically an automatic out in the lineup, and that's not going to be the case in 2023 with a Suarez. Because Suarez, or excuse me, in 2024 with a Suarez, because Suarez in 23, 232 average, 323 OBP, 391 slugging. The slash line is not dramatically different than what the D-backs put up in 2023, but the slugging is a lot better for Suarez. And when you look at the WRC plus, 102 for Suarez compared to 75 for the D-backs third baseman last year, major upgrade, double the amount of home runs, and the WAR, 0.5 F4 for D-backs third baseman last year, 3.2 F4 for Suarez this past season. So basically triple or more than triple the amount. What is that? 5 times, the quintuple the amount of WAR compared to D-backs third baseman in 2023. So Suarez, by the numbers, statistically, major upgrade over what the D-backs were already throwing out at third base this past season. Even though the home runs were down for Suarez, when we look at the hard contact stats, still massive, still 90-mile-an-hour exit velocity, still over 40% hard contact rate. Like, even though the over the fence power wasn't there, you still saw the doubles. You still had 20 plus home runs. And I believe in Chase Field. I think it's a little bit better of a hitter's ballpark than what the Mariners have. I think we could see those power numbers go way back up for Suarez. He's still very good against fastballs, crushes fastballs, even though he struggles against breaking and off-speed pitches. Really good against the fastball. And last year had one of the best defensive seasons he's ever had in his career. Defensive metrics, love Suarez from last year. D-backs third baseman last year were fine. They were solid. But Evan Longoria, definitely not as rangy as he used to be at near 40 years of age. Like, we don't expect him to be, right? Suarez, 31 going on 32. It's not like he's the youngest guy, but he's also not old, and coming off a good defensive season, I think should really help this D-backs defense overall, which we know is their calling card. There way cheaper compared to the free agent options. Like, when you look at Matt Chapman and the Candelarios and the Turners, like, those guys are probably going to get 13 to 18 million a year during free agency this past season. That's probably what their projected salaries were going to be, between 13 and 18 million. Maybe a guy like Matt Chapman could even get closer to a 20 million. But that would have just been so expensive. Like, you would have had to give a Chapman like a 4-year deal, probably a Candelario 4-year deal. Maybe Turner gets only a 1 or 2-year deal, but you probably would have had to give him a higher annual salary considering it was a shorter deal. So for Suarez, only 1 more year of guaranteed money and then a team option. So if he doesn't work out in 2024, you can move on and upgrade the position again next year. Or if he does work out and has a massive bounce back season, you could pick up that team option and then bring him back for 2025. And he's a lot cheaper than the Chapmans and the Candelarios. He's on a shorter term deal, so he can still upgrade in the future. I just think trading for Suarez was probably a lot smarter of a move than signing one of those free agent third basemen who you would have had to overpay for. And to be honest, is there that much of a difference between a Chapman, a Candelario, a Justin Turner as compared to a Suarez? Probably not. They're probably all the same tier of players. So I would rather give Suarez he's making like 11 million in 2024. Rather give him 11 million for a 1-year deal than Matt Chapman 18 million a year for the next 4 seasons. And Suarez, he's always available. 162 games played last year. He's routinely at between 145 and like 155 games every single season. This is a guy that doesn't get hurt. This is a guy that is always healthy. And I think the D-backs gave up absolutely nothing to acquire him. Carlos Vargas is someone that has struggled on every level. He's a flamethrower. He can hit 99 on both his sinker and fastball, but walks a ton of dudes, gives up a lot of runs. He's just not someone that's really panned out. And you gave up a backup catcher as well. Like, I think the assets that the D-backs gave up, such a smart move. You gave up no one they feel good about long term. You get to acquire a power hitting, good glove third baseman who's cheaper than the options in free agency. Just a perfect move by Mike Hazen and this D-backs front office. D-backs still have a lot of work to do this free agency, but third base is at least locked in now. I still want to bring back a Lourdes Gurriel or Tommy Pham because I just don't think you can trust 162 games of just McCarthy, Thomas, and Corbin Carroll from an offensive standpoint. I mean, of course, you could trust Corbin Carroll, right? But I don't know if I could trust McCarthy and Thomas to provide me enough offense in the outfield for a full season. So I would like to bring back a Lourdes Gurriel or a Tommy Pham for that reason and add one more bat on top of that. I still want like an everyday DH, like a JD Martinez or something, who can just be an offensive monster house in our DH spot, or bring in someone like a Brandon Drury who can be a complimentary offensive bat, but can also play everywhere defensively, platoon for you, shortstop, third base, outfield. Like, bring in someone like that. And of course, another starting pitcher. So, first big domino for the D-backs this offseason. They're off to a good start. I can't wait to see what else Mike Hazen has cooking up this offseason.